All right, this is the guide to buying a franchise, part 3. Technically, we have our opener, then we talk about the franchise business model, talked about is a franchise right for you, and now we're talking about finding the right opportunity in the way that they present it. Coming up next. All right, within the guide, they start talking about finding the right franchise opportunity for you. A few things that I want to call it here, and then Charles, just your viewpoint on how they frame this up. There are many ways other than franchisors' website to find information, and the first thing they go to is local outlets, which I guess if you're a fan of the brand, that's one route. They talk about a franchise handbook, which there is this giant handbook. I remember getting it in the mail. I haven't gotten a mail in a long time, but there's the handbook. Exposition, which is franchise expos, and then franchise brokers, which I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that section too. And you can see that they've definitely beefed that up. But from a general sense, they're saying the way that you're going to find a franchise is local outlets, a handbook, an expo, or a broker. How much do you agree with that? Are there other areas that a candidate might go through to finding the right franchise opportunity for themselves?
No, those are absolutely channels. But I think a step before all this is if you are looking to buy a franchise right now, how will brands or the idea of franchising engage with you? So be aware of a couple of things. There's passive and active outreach for franchise marketing. So you may be a professional, you may be working in corporate America, you have a LinkedIn profile, you may be receiving messages on LinkedIn of, hey, Charles, hey, Nick, have you ever thought about franchising? So you're going to get solicitations on LinkedIn potentially. So that's an active outreach. There's other instances too now where maybe you do have some curiosity about a particular franchise business. You eat at a local restaurant, realize it's a franchise. Maybe you take a look at their franchise sales web page, and now all of a sudden you're going to get hit with retargeted ad campaigns by that franchisor. You may also do more searching. You're not going to realize this. We call them portals, where you're doing search for, franchises that make me rich. And you're going to land on a website that says top 5 franchises that make me rich. And what you're going to find out, it's a portal. And what does that mean? A portal is set up to present to people like you of, hey, we're here to help you evaluate franchise opportunities. Sign on, provide your info, and we'll give you access to information. And so you may be engaging with marketing on the franchise sales side and not realizing.
All right, so few more comments that I want to add to that. I think the restaurant industry is probably the best lead-in for education of franchise opportunities, because someone says, ooh, I love your restaurant, you should franchise, which then they go down the path of franchising. But they also say, I love this restaurant, I want to own one. I would say that's probably the best marketer of franchising. And then you go to these next levels. I don't know that you're going to find a handbook. The portals, I think people do fall into that based on what you just said, Charles. But I want to put an asterisk on that. You got to understand, like, anywhere that you find franchise information, whether it's a portal, handbook is probably a little bit closer to an all-inclusive database. But a portal, the brands that are on there pay for that presence. And so I've always advised that if you're a franchise buyer, once you've determined what you're passionate about, look at anybody or everybody in that category to help determine what brand now makes sense for you. And so you think, which is where exactly which we'll get into the franchise brokers, which is exactly where the franchise brokers have taken off, because they are the tour guides of the database to say, here's what exists. However, in the broker network, they're only going to show you the brands that exist in their network too. So I say all this because it's complex. Once you've decided or made the decision that you want to explore a franchise versus start your own business, my highest and best recommendation to finding the right opportunity is one, trust your gut, and two, explore wide and then zoom in. Like zoom out to understand what's in the category so that you pick the brand that best aligns with who you are culturally and from a business investment standpoint, and then zoom in further on that category. Actually, one more thing that I want to say, Charles, you mentioned like the get rich and on these 10 franchises or whatever the portal story is. Understand that a fraction of a percentage of buyers get rich on one location. So if all you can do is invest your life savings into one, then the second level of that is you have to think scale. But if you invest your life savings into one and you're not thinking scale, understand that at best you're replacing your income from your job, which is not a bad thing because you're in control of your own CEO. But there's an important data point there. So that's my initial viewpoint on that stuff. Any comments on that?
Yeah, no, Nick, let's go through this list, right? Like you've started. So finding the right opportunity, FTC saying local outlets, your point, Nick, which I agree with. We hear so many stories where successful multi-unit franchisees, why'd you buy the franchise? Well, I love the product and I became a franchisee. Just be on guard also, just because you love a sandwich doesn't mean that it's a good investment. So local outlets, experience at the consumer level with a brand, valid. Next, franchise handbooks. I don't know if that's even relevant anymore. Next, franchise expos. You're interacting with franchisors and their team. There could be at least a good basic information gathering process at an expo. But then again, keep in mind, there's very limited amounts of brands at the expo. If we think back on expositions, 100 years ago, they were a big deal. There was no television, there was no internet or whatever. So you actually had to travel to an exposition. So expos are definitely, I would walk through them, but the biggest expo is going to be the internet universe, right? So that's important. And what do we have next? Franchise brokers. Nick, you used a great term there. In terms of them being the guide through this, franchise opportunity universe. Pros and cons. I think a big pro for you as a franchise buyer is if you find the right broker, an experienced franchise broker and an honest franchise broker. They've been through the process many times. They're going to have the discipline of saying, hey, Charles, I appreciate that you are interested in X, but we just talked about your financial capability, and that's not the right franchise for you. So if we're looking at investment level of X, reserve capital of Y, here's some things you may not have thought about. That's where you could get some good value from brokers, but you need to be proactive about it. You can't be passive, like, okay, the broker said this, so I'm going to do that. Use them as a guide and as a working process. So brokers are definitely a good tool. Anything else on that list?
No, that's the last thing. So let's try. I mean, it's the biggest section, and clearly the FTC is spending a lot of time talking about this. So let's call out some things that make sense. It's the franchise brokers. They may call themselves business coaches, advisors, or referral sources. Brokers often work for franchisors and only paid when a sale is made. Accurate. That is an accurate statement, but it does typically relate back to the franchise fee. Before you decide to use a broker, consider whether you need a broker service or could get enough information by shopping online or reading trade magazines. Trade magazines, no, but shopping online seems to make sense.
Well, Nick, to that point too, right? Just because you start working with a broker doesn't mean you need to keep working with them.
That's right. Yeah, it could be an intro. Some franchise brokers may claim to be able to match you with the perfect opportunity.
This is a good warning
because they represent a wide range of business sellers. That may be true or not. Ask how many franchisors the broker represents. A broker who represents only a few franchisors will give you limited suggestions. Great. I think I'm going to highlight that one. It's great insight.
I think it's phenomenal. Look, you have to be careful as a buyer. More and more, you'll read ad copy and websites of, hey, we've done the research for you, or check out our scoring system, and this is where this ranks high, and we're going to find you the right fit. Just know many of those services, they're looking to make a commission on your purchase. And certainly if you ask them to guarantee their scoring, they're not going to guarantee. They'll run away from that, but that's okay. What I'll share on this point, as for how many franchisors the brokers represents, when I do some coach education for brokers. When I speak with really good franchise brokers, they say, Charles, it's not my job to sell the franchise. That's the franchisor's job. It's my job to communicate with the franchisee candidate, help them explore opportunities, help give some knowledge that I've gained through all the deals I've closed, and then present to them what could be a good fit. And then that franchisee, you're accountable for going on that discovery process as you evaluate the franchise opportunity, engaging with the lawyer, a franchise lawyer, on going through the FDD and some due diligence, speaking with your accountant about some financial aspects, and most important, speaking to other franchisees that bought that franchise system and their experience.
I agree on all those points. I think the one thing that's missing from the broker community, which in full transparency, we're trying to reshape that with a business that we have. If there's transparency on how much they get paid by which franchisor, I think that game changes. It's the same with like a buyer's agent or a seller's agent when buying a house. It's forward information. I think that's the one element that's missing from this. I think the broker community is beautiful. I just think the transparency in what they get paid is lackluster. And if we can lift that up a little bit more and just have a little bit of transparency on it, then when the broker says, look, you want to buy a pizza brand, here are 3 or 4 or 5 pizza brands that are in my network. What that means is they will pay me a commission. Of these 5, I do think this 1 or 2 makes sense. If these 2 don't make sense for you, though, you should go look at this one that's not in my network. The problem with that is when buying a house, it's universally regulated. When buying a franchise, it's not. So in that scenario, if franchising was perfect from a broker standpoint, that broker could still say go buy Papa John's, even though it's not in my network, and the broker would get paid in exchange for being the tour guide or recommendator, making the recommendation on what franchise to buy, which that's exactly what someone that sells a house does. So I think that's the one element that's missing from franchise brokerage. I don't know that ever gets solved. I think we're almost at the next level of disruption in the category that I don't think that gets solved. But if there's a little bit more transparency in it, then when we get to how does a broker select franchises, some franchise brokers may claim they will suggest only those franchises that meet certain standards. You may think that means that your risk is limited because the broker weeds out the poor investments. In fact, some brokers represent any franchisor willing to pay them a commission for a sale. A broker who does that might direct you to a franchisor that is failing or does not have a strong history. Ask how the broker selects the franchisors. Ask to see the selection criteria and how many franchisors the broker has recently turned down. I think that's an interesting point too.
Yeah, well, the takeaway for buyers out there is, and what the FTC is telegraphing here, is just understand the broker is technically an agent for the franchisor, and they receive a commission from the franchisor. So now it's your job as a franchise buyer. There's tremendous value in working with brokers. You need now to be certain you're working with the right ones, and ones that may say, sure, I understand you want a pizza franchise, but maybe you should also look at a completely different industry based on what you're looking for income wise and other things.
Yeah.
So that's where the real value of a good broker comes in. And like every profession, you're going to have great brokers that are going to do that. And I know, because like they'll only want to work with good brands that they can present well. And then you're going to have not so great brokers like any other profession. And then you're going to have organizations out there that are now going to try to create in-house their own sales process and rankings. And there's ethical issues there. So just radar up. That's all.
The last point in the broker section, are the broker's earnings claims reliable? And so what's interesting within the FTC's guidelines, they're not telling the candidate where to go look, which, correct me if I'm wrong on anything I'm saying, but you're going to find it in item 19. What the franchisor can disclose is in item 19, which if you get the FDD, you can go directly to item 19 within the FDD and see it. And then the second way to understand whether the earnings claims are really reliable is that when you perform your due diligence, ask the franchisees who can disclose how much they make, or if it's reliable or not. Like, when I'm looking at buying this, is what the average says. Does this seem accurate? Seems like a good question to know. One, triple check in the FDD, and two, check within your due diligence, because a broker can misguide a candidate with false information there.
So as a franchise buyer, to Nick's point, the rule is that a franchisor and a broker cannot provide you with any financial information unless it's specifically disclosed in the franchise disclosure document in item 19 of the FDD. That's the only place you could rely on data. But a word of caution, if you're dealing with franchisors and they're presenting really great data, you need to evaluate at a deeper level. If it's a new franchisor, are they just giving you data from their company-owned outlet? And how are they operating? You need to see data you could rely on as a franchise buyer. Doesn't mean you don't take a chance with a new franchisor, but you need to scrutinize the data that's reported in item 19.
Okay, so let's try simplifying this. If I were going to simplify it, here's what I would say. You've made a decision that you're going to invest into franchising. You're a first-time franchisee, so you're considering entering franchising. Step one, think about what you love. If you're going to get into food, think about what you love, or think about what the gap in the marketplace is, which the gap in the marketplace could be, power washing or carpet cleaning or pool service. Like, think through what could your community use. That gives you a good entry into it. Then start exploring, search for that category, search online of what exists. At this point, if you're like, look, this feels overwhelming, I don't know where to begin, reach out to a franchise broker. You can find them on LinkedIn. They've probably already found you. But you can find them on LinkedIn, or you can use one of the bigger groups like a FranNet or a FranChoice or one of the bigger brokerages to just contact them directly and say, I want help. Or if you don't need that, which FTC is saying this, and you're comfortable doing your own homework, fill out the form on their website. Go to the website, click franchising once you found it, fill out that form, and take a call. It costs $0 to do a call with them, and just to feel it out and tell them, look, I'm in the exploratory zone. I'm interested in learning more. Tell me what the franchise opportunity is. I think that's the biggest miss by franchise buyers, is they don't use the free tool, which is actually just go talk to the franchisor who's more than willing to take your call.
I agree. And at a certain point down the line, other franchisees in that system, I think even before you start making those calls, really start to think about what you're looking for, how much capital you have to invest, what you're looking for this investment to do. Are you looking for a passive investment? And I don't know if that really exists in franchising. Are you looking at supplement income, replace income, build a legacy for your family? Really dive into what you're looking for out of this opportunity, and then you could start exploring.
There you have it. This is, that's how you find the right opportunity. We've given it all to you. Next up in this series is selecting a franchise. You can see section.
We are going to have some groundbreaking advice on selecting the winning franchise.
And maybe Brent will appear back. Brent is like, he just shows up when he feels like it. So
we love Brent. Brent's busy. It's good.
We love Brent. Yeah, what are we doing on here? Maybe we should sign off. Another episode of FranX. Stay tuned for next week, or find the next episode online. as we continue to work through the guide to buying a franchise, FranX.